Naoto Hakyauji gets teased daily by Hayase Nagatoro, a first-year student he meets while working on his manga. Nagatoro enjoys messing with him, calling him senpai instead of his real name. Despite the annoyance, they develop a strange friendship, making Naoto realize that life with Nagatoro is anything but dull. We see several students and people enjoying their daily lives in the city. Some students were finishing their classes and going back home, while others suggested the idea of going to a karaoke to have fun. On the second floor of that school, we see several girls laughing and eating sweets or snacks, while a boy walked through the hallways of the second floor and thought about going into the library. He quickly stopped when he heard several laughs inside. He got nervous and hesitated to enter, but eventually gathered the courage. Once inside, he noticed how the group of girls were staring at Naoto Hakyauji. They decided to ignore him and continued with their conversation. Naoto took the most secluded seat, listening to the girls talking about love. Here Naoto tells us that he used to like visiting the library because it was a good place to study, and a place where hardly anyone went. But that changed when the group of girls showed up, and he didn't know how to deal with them. He saw them as a completely different species that had nothing to do with him. Naoto prepared to do his homework and leave soon, as he didn't want to bother the girls too much with his presence. While doing his homework, one of the girls complained that the tasks never seemed to end, and another wondered where Yuko could be. The girl complained that Yuko wasn't reading the messages. Soon they changed the subject, and several photos taken of a boy were shared. The protagonist was getting a little distracted by the conversation and couldn't focus on his homework. One of the girls asked the rest of the group to look at the protagonist, who hadn't noticed since he was focused on figuring out what they were talking about. He became a little worried about the silence in the library, so he turned to look at them. Upon doing so, he realized that the group of girls were watching him. He quickly looked away from them out of nerves and tried to leave the library. One of the girls approached to get a book, and our protagonist, in his nervousness, ended up knocking over his backpack, scattering all his drawings on the floor. The girl looked at the drawings and called the rest of her friends. They all began to look at the protagonist's drawing and mocked him. Naoto had no choice but to remain silent and endure all the criticism. Later, the group of friends received a message from Yuko and gathered all their things to go look for her. One of them asked Hayaki if she was going to accompany them. She replied yes, but clarified that she would do it later. Hayaki sat in front of Naoto and left all his drawings on the table. She looked at him intently and commented that she was a freshman, asking if he was a sophomore, which the protagonist confirmed. Hayaki began to smile because Naoto was older than her, and he didn't understand what was happening. Hayaki began to read the little manga that the protagonist had made and would do it out loud. Then she would mock the protagonist of the manga, called him. She asked the protagonist if he identified with that character, and he didn't know what to answer. Hayaki mentioned that she felt sorry for him too much and decided to demonstrate to Naoto how he should do the romance scenes in his manga. She asked him to play along, and Naoto tried to do it, but he didn't have the courage to continue recreating the scenes. Hayaki began to mock him, explaining that he should improve the attitude of his protagonist and not base it on himself. The protagonist remained silent, not knowing what to say, and Hayaki continued to mock him, asking him to maintain eye contact with her. However, the embarrassed protagonist ignored her. Hayaki continued to mock Naoto, to the point of making him cry, and then she would leave, not without saying goodbye. At night, we see the protagonist tormented by what he had experienced in the library. He couldn't bear the idea that someone younger had made him cry. Despite Naoto's attempts to sleep, he couldn't get all the mockery scenes that Hayaki had done out of his head. The next day, in the art room, the protagonist approached the door to enter. He was somewhat relieved that he finally managed to forget everything he had suffered yesterday. However, he was unpleasantly surprised to see Hayaki appear to greet him and ask him how he was. Hayaki would ask the protagonist several questions about whether he was part of the art club. He ignored her and gave her a handkerchief, which Hayaki had previously given him to wipe his tears. The girl took the handkerchief with some confusion, and Naoto told her that he made sure to wash the handkerchief, and besides that, he wanted to return it. This took Hayaki by surprise, who clarified to the protagonist that the handkerchief is actually a gift. Naoto ignored her and entered the art room, saying goodbye. She did nothing but laugh and entered the room, locking herself in with the protagonist. The latter was relieved to be calm and alone in the room, but he was scared to see that Hayaki was with him. She began to check the entire art room, and Naoto asked her what she was doing. She ignored him and checked several statues, asking if there were no more people in the room within the schedule. She would soon realize that she was alone with him. Naoto asked Hayaki to leave if she didn't have anything to do in the art room, but this annoyed her. She reproached Naoto for being too cold with a girl. We see Naoto drawing and trying to recreate a model he made. Heiaki took advantage to remove the model and sat in front of Naoto, mentioning that she could be a model for his drawings. Our protagonist, named Naoto Hakiauji, commented that it wasn't necessary for her to be a model. Heiaki ignored him and decided to strike a more erotic pose. Naoto quickly stopped her, saying he didn't want to draw something like that. She started to undress slowly, and Naoto, nervous, ended up agreeing to draw Heiaki, with the condition that it be a normal drawing and she keep her clothes on. She accepted, and Naoto didn't have the courage to draw her completely, as it was the first time he had seen a girl so closely, which distracted him too much from the sketch. Heiaki tried to motivate Naoto by telling him that if he drew her well, she would give him a prize in return. Nervous, Hakiauji wanted to know what the prize would be, and Heiaki clarified that it was a secret, but encouraged Naoto to keep drawing. Our protagonist spent the whole day drawing Heiaki until he finally finished. She mocked the result, but ended up agreeing to give Naoto the reward. She asked him to close his eyes. Naoto did it, although he didn't understand why. Suddenly, he felt Heiaki getting too close to him and wondered if she was trying to kiss him. In the end, he couldn't control his impulses and tried to kiss her anyway. However, it was all a trap, and Heiaki would give him a light blow, mocking him for trying to kiss her. Her teasing became more intense, to the point where she struggled a bit with Naoto to see his face. Naoto ended up crying from so much teasing and went home, with Heiaki following him and continuing to bother him. Naoto asked why she was following him home, and Heiaki explained that she needed a favor from him. Heiaki clarified that she knew it was a strange favor because they barely knew each other, but she wanted to know if he was interested in a date. This left Naoto stunned, who dropped his backpack. He didn't know what to answer, and Heiaki tried to contain her laughter. Eventually, she couldn't hold back any longer and explained to Naoto that it was all a joke. She noticed that Naoto was holding back his anger and asked him why he didn't do something about it. Here we see a flashback of Naoto, where he suffered a lot from bullying and harassment from his classmates, so he became submissive and avoided defending himself to avoid trouble. Heiaki approached Hakiauji to see if he was angry. Naoto explained the situation a bit and confessed that all the harassment overwhelms him, but he also feels somewhat relieved to have someone to talk to. He asked for her name. Heiaki revealed that her real name is Nagatoro and told Naoto that from now on they would get along. Several days later, we see Naoto finishing a drawing, and Nagatoro appeared out of nowhere to greet him intensely, running around him to bother him. Nagatoro stopped to show Naoto how she could move the hoop on her hips and invited him to play with her. Hakiauji agreed but didn't know how to get into the hoop and accidentally looked under Nagatoro's skirt. She started hitting him with the hoop, calling him lewd. Later, we see Naoto finishing his lunch in the art room. He would review a manga called Busty Vampire, liking the story and wanting to continue it. He was very impatient and couldn't wait to finish classes to buy the new volumes. This was because the next chapter of the manga was about hot springs. Suddenly, the protagonist heard someone opening the door and nervously tried to hide the manga. It was Nagatoro. She saw the mess Naoto had left with his lunch and approached him to ask what he was eating. The protagonist confessed that he was eating several yakisobas and invited her to try some. She refused, advising Naoto never to give a yakisoba to a girl. Then she asked if he was watching something erotic, as she noticed his lewd gaze. Naoto got nervous by this comment and ignored her, saying he didn't know what she meant. Nagatoro would mock him, imitating the same expressions Naoto had. Naoto discreetly tried to hide the manga, but was discovered after a few seconds. Nagatoro tried to take the manga, but Naoto resisted and started struggling with her. The protagonist tried to convince Nagatoro that the manga wasn't erotic, but she insisted on wanting to see it, stating that if there wasn't anything erotic, then she could see it too. Nagatoro managed to take the manga when Naoto's guard was down and began to review it, mocking that the manga was indeed erotic. Naoto tried to explain that the manga was actually a shonen which had some suggestive scenes but affirmed that the story didn't focus on those scenes. He explained that he buys the manga for the story, but she started making fun of the protagonist because he spoke too fast out of nervousness. Naoto tried to convince Nagatoro that the story didn't focus on that, and he showed her several pages of the manga where the story became serious at times. Nagatoro read the entire volume and was surprised that the story was good. She realized that Naoto was somewhat afraid of vampires, so she tried to scare him with her fangs and bite him. Naoto took advantage of his breath still having some of the garlic from the yakisoba and exhaled in Nagatoro's face, forcing her to step back. The protagonist used this to try to escape, but Nagatoro prevented him by jumping on him to knock him down. When they fell, Naoto accidentally touched Nagatoro's groin. She mocked him for his reactions. After class, we see both of them going home, and Nagatoro asked if it was the first time a girl had come into contact with him. Naoto didn't know how to respond to this question and ignored her. Nagatoro teased Naoto a little more on the subject and then went home. At night, we see our protagonist finishing reading the new volumes of the manga, remembering the accident, and couldn't help but get more nervous about it. The next day, Naoto went to the classroom to start a new drawing, and Nagatoro appeared to greet him. He asked her what she was doing in the art room since he wanted to draw quietly. Nagatoro invited him to play. She proposed a game where the winner could order anything to the loser. Naoto agreed, as with that power, he could get rid of all of Nagatoro's harassment. The game started, but it was soon interrupted by a call from Nagatoro's friends. She apologized to the protagonist and decided to leave to meet her friends. After class, we see Naoto in a restaurant far from school, calmly drawing his manga. To his surprise, Nagatoro and her friend appeared in the same restaurant. He decided to hide to listen to the conversation, discovering that she and her friend were dating two guys. Naoto realized that Nagatoro was too irritated talking to the guys. She commented that she wasn't very interested in having something serious with anyone. The guys decided to go to the bathroom, a little discouraged by Nagatoro's words. Her friend asked Nagatoro if she didn't like the guys. Nagatoro explained that those guys seemed too boring to her. After this, we see Naoto going back home, wondering if Nagatoro feels something for him. Suddenly, she appeared and greeted him to accompany him home. Naoto wanted to ask her something, but he didn't have the courage to do it and simply continued on his way while enduring Nagatoro's teasing. Several days later, we see our Hakioji in the art room, trying to draw some statues and being totally focused on it. Suddenly, Nagatoro surprised him and asked if she could help by modeling. Naoto quickly backed away in surprise and told Nagatoro that it wasn't necessary for her to model, explaining that he prefers to draw objects rather than people. Nagatoro wanted to force him to draw her and even took off her clothes, showing that she had her swimsuit on. Naoto didn't want to look, but eventually gave in, relieved that she was wearing a swimsuit. Nagatoro explained that she wore that swimsuit because the swim club asked her to. A week later, we see our protagonist running in the rain and trying to protect himself with his backpack to not get too wet. Nagatoro was accompanying him, and they both ran to a park where they took refuge. They dried themselves with some towels, and Nagatoro was upset that the weather forecast had failed. Our protagonist tried to calm her down by saying that the clouds seemed to indicate a passing rain, so they could leave soon. Nagatoro realized something and asked Naoto not to look at her. He wondered why, and she explained that all her clothes were soaked from the rain, so everything could be seen. She started teasing Hakioji because she knew he wanted to turn around. Naoto thought a little about the situation and decided to turn around to comment that she was wearing her swimsuit. But he was surprised to find out it wasn't true and quickly turned away, apologizing. The cold began to intensify, and Nagatoro caught a cold. She realized that the rain wasn't going to stop, so she invited the protagonist to go to her house until the rain stopped. Naoto was surprised by this but agreed since he didn't want to catch a cold. Once at the house, Nagatoro gave Naoto some clothes to change into and asked him to use the dryer so his clothes wouldn't get damaged. While the rain passed, Nagatoro made coffee and used her video game console in her room. They started playing, and Naoto realized that Nagatoro wasn't very skilled at the game, so he took advantage of this to get back at her for all the times she humiliated him. They had fun playing until the rain finally stopped. Naoto thanked her for inviting him. Nagatoro mentioned she hoped to repeat the day again. Several weeks later, at the school cafeteria, they started serving deluxe fried chicken as the daily menu. Naoto got ready to go to the dining hall, planning to have lunch alone, but he noticed it was too crowded. Nagatoro invited him to sit with her and her friends. Hakioji had no choice but to sit with them. One of the friends asked if they were a couple. Naoto quickly denied it, but Nagatoro clarified they were just starting to date, making the protagonist very nervous. The friends asked Naoto about the status of his relationship with Nagatoro, but he didn't know what to say and tried to explain he's just a friend. One of the friends teased Naoto and tried to hold his hand to ask him out. Nagatoro, jealous, stopped her friend and asked her not to touch him. She insisted on holding Naoto's hand, saying she just wanted to be friends, but Nagatoro asked her friend again not to touch Hakioji. Another friend of Nagatoro started insulting the protagonist, calling him an insect or useless for not being able to defend himself. Nagatoro got upset and told her friends they were going too far with Naoto. He wondered if Nagatoro got angry for his own good, decided to defend himself for the first time, and clarified he's not Nagatoro's boyfriend. Later, in the art room, Nagatoro scolded Naoto, saying he should stand up for himself more often, as he always lets people insult or bother him. She decided to show him how to defend himself against those kinds of people and gave him some advice, even using herself as an example. Naoto practiced a little and gained some confidence on the matter, although he accidentally hurt Nagatoro. A month later, we see the protagonist washing his hands in the school's taps. It had been a long time since he painted in oil, and he had forgotten how it felt to have to wash his hands because they were covered in paint. While he was washing, Nagatoro appeared to greet Naoto, surprising him. He asked her why she was using the same tap as him, but Nagatoro ignored him and started teasing him a bit. The next day, we see Naoto in the art room having lunch peacefully, realizing that he enjoys being alone in the art room more all this time. He heard someone entering the room and thought it might be Nagatoro. He was about to scold her, but was surprised to see that it was Nagatoro's friends who entered instead. He wondered what they were doing there. One of them asked why he wasn't with Nagatoro and they sat with him to keep him company. The protagonist wondered why they were accompanying him without Nagatoro present. Both of them started teasing Naoto, asking if he had ever touched a girl's breasts, and even started to flirt with him. Naoto didn't know what to do in this situation and nervously tried to escape from the art room. Despite his attempts, Nagatoro's friends managed to catch him and tried to force him to grope them. Despite his attempts not to do it, Naoto ended up touching their breasts. At that moment, Nagatoro appeared, angry with her friends, asking them what they were trying to do to the protagonist. He was scared to see Nagatoro so upset. Even her own friends fled the scene. Nagatoro decided to sit with the protagonist and confronted him about the situation. Naoto tried to calm her down and explain the situation. She decided to believe him and played around with him. However, it ended in an accident, and she started hitting him out of anger. Later, they both had lunch in silence. We change scenes to a baseball field, where one of them hits the ball near the school. Meanwhile, Naoto watched this from one of the school floors, somewhat worried about Nagatoro since she hadn't shown up all day. He remembered that the night before, she had offered to be his model to finish the drawing from last time, and he had accepted, now waiting for her. Naoto was partly relieved that she hadn't shown up and believed it was better that way. At that moment, he saw Nagatoro entering with a sofa. He asked her what she was trying to do, and she explained that she wanted to take the crafting club's sofa to be comfortable. Nagatoro noticed that the protagonist was melancholically watching the school baseball game. She approached him and asked if he felt jealous of the team's star player. Naoto explained that he did, as he had never received attention or praise from others and would like to experience it sometime. Nagatoro asked him if he had ever praised someone else before, which the protagonist denied. She explained that praises are earned if someone decides to give them first, so she decided to sit with the protagonist on the sofa and teach him how to give compliments. Naoto thought about how he could praise Nagatoro. He wanted to compliment her on her beauty and how she takes care of her body, but he didn't have the courage to do it. He decided to compliment her on her physical abilities, which she liked. Nagatoro used this situation to her advantage to analyze the protagonist and praised him for being very funny and expressive. Naoto wasn't very happy with this, so he tried to draw Nagatoro, reminding her that she was supposed to be his model today. She posed, but Hakioji was distracted all day and couldn't draw. Nagatoro ended up falling asleep on the sofa. Naoto was surprised to see her like that but took the chance to draw her in that position. He felt inspired and finished his portrait. Nagatoro woke up just then and saw the drawing, so she praised him for it. Several days later, Nagatoro visited the protagonist in the art room and started bothering him. However, she realized Naoto was very quiet and ignoring her. Nagatoro's friends intervened to bother Naoto as well. He invited them to leave, and they agreed. That decision devastated and angered Nagatoro. Suddenly, she woke up, realizing it was a dream, and couldn't help but scream out of fear. Naoto was scared by Nagatoro's scream and asked if something had happened. She refused to tell him about her dream, then noticed she was covered with a blanket. Naoto explained he did it because he didn't want her to catch a cold. Nagatoro mentioned that today he had been very normal and hadn't been nervous. The protagonist asked if that was a compliment, but she didn't answer. The next day, Nagatoro attended art class, skipping her swimming club class, and started tickling the protagonist to annoy him. Naoto tried to do the same to her, but Nagatoro reacted quickly and avoided it. She mentioned she wanted to show him a video and showed him her phone. Naoto watched the video. It was of a sheep receiving affection. Nagatoro noticed that Naoto hadn't cut his hair in a long time and asked why. Naoto said he was planning to cut it soon. Nagatoro, upon hearing this, decided to offer herself and approached her backpack to show the protagonist a razor. Naoto asked why she had that. She explained that the razor belonged to her brother and she had decided to take it by chance. She tried to cut Naoto's hair, but he resisted and asked her not to. Feeling cornered against the wall, he refused because he wanted a professional to cut his hair. Nagatoro decided to get various hair cutting tools for Naoto. He asked why she wanted to cut his hair if she wasn't a hairdresser. Nagatoro revealed she was actually good at cutting hair, as she had done it before with her brother. Naoto let her try to cut his hair, but a call interrupted the moment. She answered it. Surprised, it was her friends who urgently wanted to see her to give her some notes. Nagatoro had no choice but to leave and go with her friends. Hakioji was left alone in the art room, surprised to see Nagatoro's friends appear. It was then that he realized the call was a trap. Nagatoro's friends started to search the room until they found the razor she intended to use to cut the protagonist's hair. Both of them joined forces to try to make the protagonist bald. Meanwhile, Nagatoro went to her classroom to meet her friends but didn't find them, starting to suspect. Naoto's situation was interrupted by the call. The friends decided to ignore him and try to make Hakioji bald. Naoto did everything in his power to stop them. All this commotion was heard by Nagatoro, who came to his rescue and intervened at the right moment. She was too angry and stopped her friends. Both decided to run away when Nagatoro intended to fight with them. Later, Naoto enjoyed the moment when Nagatoro cut his hair. After a while, she finished making some touches and showed Naoto how he looked. He liked his new look and thanked Nagatoro for it. She blushed a bit and started joking with him. Several months later, we see Nagatoro and the protagonist walking down the street totally exhausted. It was too hot. Naoto, concerned, advised Nagatoro not to attend swimming classes in such heat. She ignored him and decided to invite him to eat shaved ice. He agreed, as he was very thirsty. She told him she knew a good place nearby, explaining excitedly that the shaved ice there stacked the ice fluffy and piled it up like a mountain. As they headed to the store, they were surprised to find an extensive line for shaved ice, mostly of people who couldn't stand the heat and wanted to cool off somehow. This surprised Nagatoro, commenting that there weren't so many people before. Naoto realized the place was having a shaved ice promotion and told her. Nagatoro tried to force the protagonist to join the line, explaining that the shaved ice was too delicious and worth the wait. However, he disagreed, mentioning that he'd settle for an ice cream from a nearby convenience store. This angered Nagatoro, who turned to look at him. Naoto, out of fear, had no choice but to agree to join the line. Both endured the heat and were slowly losing patience as the line didn't move. Naoto noticed two men were staring at Nagatoro, so he decided to step in their view and protect her. They spent several hours in line. Nagatoro felt a bit dizzy from the heat, and the protagonist asked if she was okay, to which she weakly affirmed. Naoto realized she was suffering from the heat and took her to a vending machine. He bought several bottles of water and gave them to Nagatoro. He asked her to cool down as she was close to heat stroke. She was somewhat surprised that Naoto was concerned about her, but she drank the water and caught her breath. Nagatoro mentioned she really wanted to eat the shaved ice. Naoto asked if she wanted to go back to the line. Nagatoro replied no, as she preferred to go to the shop when there were fewer people. She then had an idea and asked Naoto to wait on a bench. Noticing she was taking too long, he wondered why. Nagatoro appeared with 2 ice creams and startled the protagonist. She mentioned she was giving him the ice cream as thanks for worrying about her. The protagonist agreed to eat the ice cream. Later, they both went home. Nagatoro mentioned that school holidays would start tomorrow. However, she clarified that she wouldn't have much free time as she was part of the swimming club and had to train in the summer. Naoto wondered what he could do during the holidays, thinking he might be somewhat bored without her. Nagatoro asked Hakioji for his number as she wanted to stay in touch with him. Naoto decided to give her his number, but warned her that he didn't like using cell phone apps or checking social media too much, as he disliked when people knew if he had read or ignored messages. They parted ways, and Naoto was surprised to see that Nagatoro left happily, thinking he did something right after all. We switch scenes to Naoto waking up in the sky. He met a mysterious hooded woman who woke him up. Hakioji wondered where he was. The girl told him he was now in Chichibu Nagatoro. This hooded woman congratulated the protagonist, revealing that he was chosen as the savior of the world. Naoto asked for her identity, but she refused to answer and told him her mission was to defeat a Dark Lord, who was the evilest and on the loose. Naoto refused to help, telling her he had no power to do anything to the Dark Lord. The hooded woman approached him and stared at him. She started sniffing him. Naoto was somewhat uncomfortable with the situation but let her continue. The girl told him that with his scent, she could tell he was qualified to be a great sage. Hakioji asked if that was good or bad. She mentioned it was a good thing, as he had the power to be the eternal virgin. Naoto was annoyed to hear this. The girl offered him a magic staff to defend himself and asked him to continue with his mission. She pushed the protagonist and threw him out of the sky. We see Naoto falling into a fantasy world and trying to cast a spell. The staff reacted with a powerful flash, levitating the protagonist to prevent him from getting hurt. Hakioji wondered if he really used magic to avoid getting hurt, something he couldn't believe. His thoughts were interrupted when a roar sounded throughout the area. It was a dragon flying in the sky. In addition to that, there were some small creatures migrating to another area. A giant lizard appeared and tried to devour Naoto. He had no choice but to flee and attack the monster with a magic bolt. The impact of the spell caused an explosion. In the smoke, the creature emerged unharmed, and it tried to attack him with a swipe. Naoto narrowly dodged it, seeing how a tree was sliced by the powerful blow of the creature. Hakioji thought about giving up, but a girl appeared to save him. She gave a strong kick to the creature and threw it into the sea. She introduced herself as Neketoro. She teased Naoto for not being too physically strong and decided to help him. She forced him to be her travel companion and mentioned she wanted to defeat the Dark Lord. They traveled all over the fantasy world and defeated monsters, faced various adversities, camped, and spent a lot of time until they encountered a beast. It was an imposing black dragon. Neketoro tried to confront it first. The dragon threw several fireballs, which Neketoro managed to dodge with her agility. She tried to land several blows, but the dragon showed its intelligence, swiftly dodging Neketoro's strikes despite its large size. Naoto analyzed the situation and was surprised that the dragon could keep up with Neketoro's frantic pace. Despite her efforts, Neketoro was defeated by the dragon. The beast unleashed a powerful breath of fire that engulfed them both. Naoto used his strongest spell, managing to repel the flames, though it drained a lot of his energy. Hakioji asked Neketoro to join forces to defeat the dragon, and she agreed. Naoto blinded the dragon by attacking its eyes, while Neketoro managed to damage it with a kick. That blow was enough to bring down the dragon. Neketoro approached Naoto and kissed him as a reward. She asked Hakioji to be equally brave more often, suggesting they might defeat the Dark Lord that way. The Black Dragon complained about the damage it had received and revealed itself to be a human. Neketoro recognized her as Gamo, her friend, and Yoshi. The four continued their journey until they reached the territory of the Dark Lord. They saw the imposing castle from afar. Naoto decided to go ahead and open the castle gates. The group explored the place, finding the Dark Lord's throne, surprised to find it empty. Naoto mentioned that the Dark Lord had escaped, but Neketoro denied it. This took the protagonist by surprise, and he watched as his own team turned into demons. Neketoro introduced herself as the Dark Lord. Naoto was somewhat worried that he would have to face 3 Dark Lords. The 3 joined forces to attack the protagonist. He tried to use his most powerful spell on them, but couldn't harm them. Naoto began to lose hope. The 3 mocked Hakioji for getting his hopes up, saying he should be more realistic with his dreams and expectations. Naoto began to torment himself as he had really grown fond of her. Hakioji woke up from his dream, realizing he had fallen asleep in a cafe, and his scream attracted people's attention. Nagatoro and her friends, Gamo, Yoshi, and Nagatoro greeted the protagonist. Nagatoro approached him to ask what he was doing, and Naoto told her he was trying to do his summer homework. Soon he decided to leave the place. Nagatoro found the protagonist's sketchbook, so she went to deliver it and mocked his drawings as they were very lascivious. Several days later, we see Naoto watching TV, watching a program about girls promoting a specific beach. Hakioji was somewhat bored, had nothing to do, and didn't want to go to the beach as it was still summer. Nagatoro called Naoto for the first time, which surprised him, and he answered. She invited him to the beach as she was bored. Naoto accepted and went to meet her. He was surprised to see that Gamo and Yoshi were with them, and he was a bit disappointed as he had hoped it would be a solo outing. The group started teasing the protagonist on the way. Once at the beach, they chose a spot to stay. The girls changed into their swimsuits and invited the protagonist to swim with them. Naoto refused and confessed that he didn't know how to swim. Instead, he decided to draw. Nagatoro and her friend started swimming duels. Nagatoro noticed that the protagonist was somewhat uncomfortable and lonely in the situation. Naoto wondered what he should do. He wanted to enjoy the beach but didn't have the courage to do fun things. Nagatoro approached the protagonist to accompany him. She applied sunscreen to him and forced him to swim with them. Naoto had no choice but to go and enjoyed the day with them, having fun at the outing. At night, Nagatoro asked the protagonist if he liked the beach, to which he affirmed and mentioned that it served as inspiration for him to paint a picture. Some time later, we see Naoto walking down the street after buying some things at the convenience store, noticing that many people were dressed in kimonos. At that moment, he realized that the summer festival was that same night. Naoto stayed at home playing video games while wondering if Nagatoro would invite him to the festival. He waited for several hours and even checked the clock impatiently, but he didn't receive a call. He decided to go to the festival alone, as he got bored of playing video games. He planned to just take a look at the festival stalls and then leave. At that moment, Gamo and Yoshi appeared to greet him. The protagonist decided to run away from them but ended up getting tired when he reached a temple. Gamo asked Naoto if he's also the type of person who usually goes to festivals. Our protagonist didn't respond to any comments. Gamo thought of a way to annoy Hakioji and asked if he expected to meet Nagatoro. Naoto didn't say anything, and Gamo told him that Nagatoro is currently training at the swimming club. Upon hearing this, Hakioji decided to leave, but Gamo and Yoshi stopped him to take a picture. That photo was sent to Nagatoro, who had just finished training. Upon seeing that Naoto was with her friends, she didn't hesitate to appear at the festival within seconds. Nagatoro confronted Gamo to leave Naoto alone, but she challenged Nagatoro, proposing a duel, and the winner would keep Naoto as their pet. Nagatoro accepted the challenge. The duel began, and each had to get as many prizes at the festival as possible. While this was going on, Nagatoro asked Naoto if he expected her to invite him to the festival. Hakioji became very nervous upon hearing this and immediately denied everything. Nagatoro advised Naoto that if he wanted to go out with someone, he should also propose ideas and take the initiative. The duel continued, and they spent the whole night at the festival. Gamo and Yoshi eventually admitted defeat to Nagatoro and left. Nagatoro decided to take a walk around the festival with Naoto. Both were having fun and eating a bit. Nagatoro noticed something and mentioned to Hakioji that it all seems like a date. Naoto explained that he didn't plan to have a date with her because he wanted it to be something important, and with a special person. Nagatoro teased Naoto, saying he would never have a date with him. To continue teasing him, she challenged Naoto to try to walk hand in hand with her. The protagonist wanted to do it, but his motivation was interrupted by the fireworks of the festival, which were starting. They decided to go see them, but they found a long line that didn't seem to move. Naoto thought about it and decided to take a detour with Nagatoro. The two ventured into the forest and reached a hill where they could appreciate the fireworks without problems. Nagatoro asked him how he knew about the existence of the hill. Naoto told her that he had been to the hill to watch the fireworks a long time ago. Nagatoro began teasing the protagonist, recommending that if he planned to have a date with someone, it was best not to take them to a dark place. After the festival ended, they returned home. Nagatoro told Naoto that she prefers yukata festivals. Naoto thought about the situation and proposed to Nagatoro to go to the festival together next year. She agreed and asked Naoto to wear a yukata. She wanted to match their clothes. After the holidays, Naoto returned from his first day of school and was going home when he heard a conversation, so he hid to keep listening. It was Yoshi, Gamo, Nagatoro, and another girl. The four were chatting about boys, and Naoto realized that Nagatoro spends a lot of time with him. Two boys appeared to sit with Nagatoro and her friends. Hakioji was a little annoyed to see that the two boys were harassing Nagatoro, so he wanted to intervene. He decided to approach with courage, but ended up regretting it when he stepped on a branch. Gamo noticed this and forced the protagonist to join them. Naoto took advantage of the situation to invite Nagatoro to leave together. She blushed at the proposal but was relieved that Naoto tried to get her out of that situation. She didn't hesitate to accept and left with Naoto. Gamo and the others decided to accompany them. Naoto wondered why they were following them, and Gamo explained that they were uncomfortable with those two boys, so they accompanied them as an excuse to get away. The girls started teasing the protagonist on the way so as not to get bored. It was here that Naoto realized that Nagatoro was actually happy with what he did. He could tell by her smile, and he felt good about himself. Several days later, in the art room, Nagatoro teased Naoto because his arms were too skinny. She advised him to exercise more because with so little strength, he might lose to a girl and wouldn't be able to defend himself against someone else. She invited him to do exercises together, but Naoto refused, saying he didn't like feeling pain in his body after exercising. Nagatoro decided to do a personalized exercise and forced the protagonist to do it. While Nagatoro forced Naoto to exercise, they were discovered by two girls passing by the art club. They misunderstood everything and ran away. This made Nagatoro nervous, and the protagonist couldn't take it anymore and fell to the ground after just 3 minutes of starting the exercise. The next day, we see Naoto thinking about what to draw. He couldn't sleep because he recently bought a new video game that was so fun he lost track of time. Nagatoro reasoned with the protagonist and asked if he managed to study, mentioning that there are important exams in 4 days. Naoto replied that he hadn't been able to study. She scolded him, explaining that if he didn't pass those exams, he would fail the course and probably be forced to repeat the year. If that happened, they would both be in the same class. Naoto thought about it and told Nagatoro that repeating the year wouldn't be so bad because if he was with her, he would never be bored. This surprised Nagatoro, but she began to force him to study, saying she didn't want to be in the same class with him. Later, we see Naoto studying in the library. Nagatoro and her friends decided to accompany him to make fun of him since he was the only student desperate for the exam. One of Nagatoro's friends appeared in the library and tried to encourage the protagonist to study, saying that Gamo and Yoshi were also at risk of failing and repeating the year, unlike Nagatoro, who has good grades in every subject. Several days later, Hakyoji was able to get good grades on the exams. Nagatoro was somewhat annoyed and asked Naoto if he hated the idea of being in the same class. A week later, Nagatoro passed by the art room and heard some strange noises. She decided to approach and listen, misunderstood the situation, as there were many comments without context, and entered the room angry. Gamo, Yoshi, and their other friend were surprised by Nagatoro's attitude because they were actually trying to remove a splinter from Naoto. Nagatoro emitted an intense murderous aura, and her friends were scared, trying to explain the situation. Nagatoro took a pair of tweezers and forcibly removed the splinter from Naoto because she didn't want her friends to do it. After class, they both went home. Nagatoro asked the protagonist why he hangs out so much with her friends. Naoto didn't understand what she meant and asked what the comment was about. She scolded him, saying he always helps pretty girls. Naoto explained that it wasn't like that. Nagatoro decided to challenge the protagonist to rock, paper, scissors, and the loser had to carry the other's backpack. Naoto accepted and won, so Nagatoro was forced to carry the protagonist's backpack. When they reached the first street crossing, Nagatoro challenged the protagonist again, and this time, he let her win. Naoto carried Nagatoro's backpack, and they went home like that. At the last crossing, Naoto decided to challenge Nagatoro again but ended up losing and was forced to carry Nagatoro all the way to her house. However, due to a poor grip, he almost dropped Nagatoro, but he managed to hold her firmly. By accident, he touched her too much, and Nagatoro didn't hesitate to run away without saying anything. Naoto wondered if she was upset about the grip. Here we see that she's actually embarrassed by what happened and couldn't handle the situation. We see Naoto waiting for a message from Nagatoro, thinking he did something wrong. He finally received several messages from her and a call. Naoto answered to apologize, but Nagatoro mocked the situation and told him not to worry about it. A few days later, we see Naoto trying to draw in the art room. He was somewhat distracted because Nagatoro seemed to want to hit something, and he asked her what was wrong. She told him she just wanted to train since she read a boxing manga and wanted to imitate it. She came up with an idea and asked Hakyoji to spar with her. Naoto refused, explaining that he knows nothing about boxing. However, Nagatoro forced him to participate. Naoto said he didn't want to participate in any combat-related practice and distanced himself from Nagatoro, who kept insisting and even landed some punches. Nervous, Naoto slipped and accidentally hugged Nagatoro. Immediately, he backed away, apologizing. Nagatoro mentioned that he accidentally did something smart since grappling seems to be his greatest strength in a fight. Later, we see Nagatoro telling her friends about what happened. Her friends were motivated to spar with the protagonist and went to look for him. Nagatoro didn't like that idea and stopped them. She tried to come up with an excuse for them not to go see Naoto, but they refused to listen. So, Nagatoro went to the art room first to warn the protagonist to flee. He didn't understand what was going on, but her friends appeared to ask him to spar. Nagatoro offered to stop them and protect him. This escalated to the point where Nagatoro was willing to fight Gamo for real. Naoto was somewhat worried about the situation. We switch scenes and see Hakyoji returning to the art room totally exhausted. Upon entering, he found Nagatoro and her friends causing chaos. Naoto wasn't really in a good mood, but he decided to spend time with them. Hakyoji sat down to draw and asked the girls why they were in the art room. Gamo explained that they usually hang out in the dining room, but several boys were making too much noise. Despite trying to reason with them, they didn't listen, so they went to the art room to be quieter. Naoto didn't want to believe them, saying they seemed like the type of people who resort to violence to solve things. They mentioned that he shouldn't underestimate them, as there are better ways than direct confrontation. Hakioji got scared sensing the girl's malicious aura and asked what kind of ways those were. Nagatoro mentioned they have a personal assassin who will take care of everything. At that moment, one of Nagatoro's friends joined the guys who were causing a ruckus in the dining hall. She started flirting with them and winning their hearts. Nagatoro explained that one of her friends would destroy the group from within, and then they could be at peace in the dining hall. The protagonist thought it was best not to become an enemy of Nagatoro's friends. Gamo clarified they only make these decisions when guys are very annoying. Then she started teasing the protagonist. Nagatoro didn't like Gamo's jokes and didn't hesitate to defend Naoto. All this confrontation ended in a bet. Nagatoro commented they should look for an erotic manga hidden by the protagonist in the art room. The first one to find it wins, and the loser has to cook for the other. Gamo accepted the bet and didn't hesitate to search with Nagatoro. Naoto realized Nagatoro didn't want to lose, so he helped her win by cheating a little. Gamo and Yoshi left after seeing this. Several days later, Hakioji was trying to make a portrait when Nagatoro entered the room to greet him. Naoto noticed Nagatoro was wearing earrings and stared at her. She asked him what he thought of them, and the protagonist blushed with embarrassment since he didn't expect Nagatoro to find out. But he complimented her, saying they looked good on her. Nagatoro thanked him for the compliment and asked him to wear earrings too. Naoto refused, explaining that someone like him would look weird wearing earrings. Nagatoro mentioned he could wear them only inside the art room, but if he agreed, they could match earrings. Naoto blushed at this proposal and agreed. Nagatoro took a special tool and tried to pierce his ear. Naoto was somewhat nervous because he didn't want to alter anything in his body, but he was relieved when she didn't do anything. Nagatoro started teasing him. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by the appearance of one of Nagatoro's friends, who entered the room asking for help and hugged the protagonist in tears. The three decided to meet with Yoshi and Gamo at a cafe. The girl told them there was a guy harassing her, the same ones who were making a lot of noise in the cafe. She clarified that the guy had become a stalker who wouldn't stop following her. Naoto was looking away in horror. The girl proved her story by pointing out that the guy was hiding in one of the bushes. The group looked at the bush and were surprised. Gamo asked Hakioji for his opinion. Naoto replied that it was partly the girl's fault for playing with people's feelings. The girl pretended to cry and asked the protagonist for a favor. Naoto had a bad feeling, and the girl asked if he could pretend to be her boyfriend to scare off the guy. Naoto and Nagatoro were surprised. She clarified it would only be temporary until the guy decided to leave her alone. Naoto asked her why she was asking him, and she said she didn't have a real boyfriend or anyone to trust, so she could only ask him. Hakioji wasn't very sure about accepting. He was worried about the harassment and didn't deny it, but he also didn't want people to think badly of him. Nagatoro, on the other hand, looked at the protagonist with jealousy since he was hesitating. Gamo encouraged the protagonist to help the girl. After all, he's the only harmless guy in school, so no one will be harmed. Nagatoro let out her jealousy and mentioned that the girl would be very harmed by that plan. Hakioji got scared seeing Nagatoro so upset and jealous for the first time. She tried to convince her friend that the plan was a bad idea, accusing Naoto of potentially being a stalker. However, the girl ignored Nagatoro and asked the protagonist for his answer. He had no choice but to accept. Nagatoro, upon hearing his response, broke inside. The next day, we see Naoto waiting near a water fountain. He was supposed to go on a date with the girl but wondered what he should do. He reminded himself it was to help the girl scare off the stalker, so he didn't think of anything too complicated. The girl appeared and greeted the protagonist. They both decided to walk around the city while being spied on by Nagatoro, Gamo, and Yoshi without them knowing. The girl, named Sakura, asked Naoto if he was nervous about everything, which he denied. Sakura recommended him to just go along with it and follow her lead. As they walked, she noticed the protagonist's discomfort and asked if he was truly okay with his decision. Naoto wanted to know what she meant. They went to a pier. Naoto asked where the stalker was, and Sakura tried to find him. At that moment, Nagatoro intervened, showing she had the stalker tied up and forced him in front of everyone to leave Sakura alone. The boy apologized and promised not to bother Sakura anymore. Nagatoro asked them to end the fake date. Each went home, and the protagonist left with Nagatoro. She apologized, as she knew she ruined their first date. Naoto assured her it was okay since it wasn't a real date, and instead, she saved him the trouble. Nagatoro started teasing Hakioji but ended up encouraging him, saying it probably wasn't his time to have a date. Naoto, upon hearing this, assumed that someday he'll have a real date with someone he likes. A few months later, we see Nagatoro and Naoto together. She asked him if he wanted to see something he might like. The protagonist didn't know what she meant, and Nagatoro showed him her fried chicken selfie. Naoto had imagined things out of context because of the way Nagatoro expressed herself, but he was relieved to know Nagatoro was referring to actual fried chicken, which they call a selfie. Back at school, Nagatoro and her friends were watching the second-year students running on the school field. They had to do a marathon as part of the exam, and the protagonist was struggling. After classes, Naoto went home and met Nagatoro. She scolded him for being last in the marathon and asked why he ran so strangely. The protagonist explained that he wasn't a good marathon runner because exercising his body wasn't his strong suit. Nagatoro didn't believe him and warned him that she would train him starting tomorrow. The next morning, we see Naoto drowsy in a park. Nagatoro appeared to greet him, and they both started jogging around the city. Naoto jogged for several hours until he collapsed exhausted halfway through the marathon. He commented he couldn't go on anymore. Nagatoro teased him for not having the courage to continue, saying even elementary kids have more courage. Deep down, she was upset that the protagonist gave up so easily. Later, we see Naoto resting on a bench. He was able to run the 5-kilometer marathon. He soon started stretching with Nagatoro's help, as he was very inflexible and needed assistance. While they stretched, Yoshi discovered them 2 days later. Naoto was in the art room, wondering who he could ask to be his model. He wanted to draw a person. Nagatoro appeared in the room and asked Naoto if he needed help. Naoto told her he needed a model to make a portrait for the festival exhibition. She started mocking Hakioji because he didn't have friends, but she agreed to be his model. However, Naoto immediately refused. Nagatoro, annoyed, started hitting the protagonist, saying she just wanted to help, and he didn't need to be rude. Naoto revealed that he actually needed to draw a boy. Nagatoro misunderstood this and asked why a boy. Naoto clarified that he felt strange trying to draw a girl. Nagatoro teased the protagonist and showed him the manga drawings he had a long time ago, specifically the drawing of Nekatoro. Naoto had no choice but to agree to draw Nagatoro, but he warned her she had to wear specific clothing. Nagatoro mocked Hakioji, thinking he was going to draw something erotic, and asked what kind of clothing. Naoto took the opportunity to mock her back and asked her to get a suit similar to Negatoro's. Nagatoro left, and the protagonist wondered if he was too cruel since she offered to be his model. While he waited, Nagatoro appeared, and Naoto was surprised to see her dressed like Negatoro. Naoto didn't know what to say. Nagatoro reminded him that it was his idea. She wanted to hear a compliment from him, but Naoto couldn't say anything. All this was being watched by Nagatoro's friends, who didn't expect the situation. Gamo and the others entered the room to accompany them. Naoto prepared to draw Nagatoro, and the group took the opportunity to talk about each club's special exams. Each one said how the exams in their club would be. Nagatoro asked Hakioji if the art club would have a special exam. Naoto thought about what exam he could do, as he is the current leader of the club. The girls offered him several ideas. At that moment, footsteps echoed through the halls. The protagonist heard this and got alarmed, as it was one of the students from the art club. He quickly asked the girls to hide. They agreed, although they doubted Naoto a bit. At that moment, the school president appeared, who was part of the art club. Hakioji asked her if she needed something. She mentioned she didn't need a reason to attend a club since she could go anytime. She approached the protagonist and asked what they would do for the club exams. Naoto proposed to do an art exhibition. The president remained silent and mentioned she had recently heard unpleasant rumors about him. Naoto didn't understand what she meant, and the president asked if he had been bringing a group of girls to the club. Hakioji remained silent, and the president warned him that if he didn't do something to stop the rumors, she would be forced to expel him from the art club. Nagatoro decided to confront the president, saying it's unfair what she's doing to Naoto. The president mentioned that if the protagonist truly takes his club seriously, he will have to do 2 art exhibitions, one for the school and another more personal. However, she clarified it would be a duel since she would also do her art exhibition. If Naoto won, she would leave him alone, but if he lost, he would have to leave the club. Naoto wasn't sure about accepting this, but Nagatoro did it for him and offered to help. The group of girls tried to motivate the protagonist to win the exhibition and asked how good the president was at drawing. Naoto revealed it was impossible to win since the president helped him find his passion for art, and even taught him to draw. Nagatoro decided to be the model, while Gamo and the others would try to attract as much audience as possible for the protagonist to win. Naoto decided to show the girls a painting, which was painted by the president and was used as part of a museum exhibition. The girls were surprised since the painting was erotic, as the president had painted herself naked. The protagonist explained that she masters art too much, and he can't capture as much attention as she does. Gamo commented that he wouldn't win if he used Nagatoro as a model since she's not attention-grabbing enough for other guys. Nagatoro was offended by this comment and got upset with Gamo. The girls started teasing Nagatoro, but Naoto defended her, saying that despite everything, Nagatoro is attractive. She blushed at the protagonist's comment and felt motivated to continue helping him so he wouldn't be expelled from the art club. They began to propose several ideas that the protagonist could draw. After classes, Naoto returned home silently. He didn't feel like talking to Nagatoro much because he was thinking about what to draw. For several days, the protagonist tried to draw Nagatoro, but none of the portraits convinced him. He decided to vent his frustration and asked the girls to leave him alone since he wanted to draw something else. Nagatoro was upset by Naoto's attitude, feeling that he didn't value her enough to be drawn, so she left with her friends. The next day, Hakioji took advantage of his solitude to draw several portraits, specifically oil paintings. The president appeared and looked at the protagonist's painting, saying he wasn't trying hard enough. She mentioned that even if he draws or paints well, he can't convey what he feels, and that's why he always fails. She told him that an artist should always draw what they love or want the most, as that way, their drawings can express emotions with each stroke, and she recommended him to be honest with himself. Naoto thought about drawing something he liked, but he couldn't think of anything. Nagatoro entered the room and saw the protagonist with the president, misunderstanding the situation, and left. The president realized that Naoto was in love, so she encouraged him to chase after Nagatoro and turn her into his model. He decided to follow her advice and followed Nagatoro. However, she was still upset with Hakioji and would run away from him. Naoto thought about all the time he had spent with Nagatoro, realizing that she always tried to motivate him to be better every day. Naoto didn't want to let her go, so he followed her to the swimming club. He would ask her to be his model, but she refused, saying he should tell the president. Naoto tried to explain everything, and Nagatoro, still annoyed, continued to refuse to be his model. Suddenly, she slipped, and the protagonist saved her from falling. Nagatoro asked why he was so insistent on wanting to draw her when he didn't want to before. Naoto explained that he hadn't understood before that he should always draw what he loves the most, and he realized he liked drawing her. That's why he wants her to be his model, because she's the only thing he loves the most, and he enjoys having her by his side. Only then can he express his emotions through art. She blushed at Hakioji's words and decided to pull the protagonist so that both fell into the swimming pool. They both surfaced and tried to dry themselves. Naoto realized that Nagatoro seemed to be happy now and even smiled again. Hakioji felt equally happy seeing her like that and decided to play with her, splashing water. The next day, Naoto decided to make several oil portraits of Nagatoro. He decided to show these to the girls. Gamo commented that she feels a little nervous seeing the paintings, but she finds them beautiful. However, Gamo reminded him that the problem was the president's painting. The girls decided to sneak into the room the president used to paint and found her painting. They were surprised by the drawing and decided to return urgently because Nagatoro had fainted. When Nagatoro recovered, she was very discouraged by what she had seen, and all the girls wondered what they could paint to match the president's skill. The day of the art exhibition arrived, and all the students gathered to see the exhibition and also participate with their works. The girls appeared with cat costumes to sabotage the exhibition and try to convince the audience to vote for Naoto's paintings. Gamo had forced Nagatoro to dress up as a cat to attract even more attention, and the others helped her do dances to bring more people. The exhibition continued, and Naoto realized that he was really evenly matched with the president because they had the same number of people. Two girls approached the protagonist and asked if he was the president of the art club. Naoto confirmed it, and they asked him if he had made all the paintings by himself. He said yes, and the girls started praising Hakioji for his paintings. Both of them asked the protagonist to teach them how to draw. Naoto didn't know what to say about it, but he agreed to do it. Hakioji decided to go with Nagatoro and invited her to eat. She accepted, and they went to the cafeteria. Nagatoro was somewhat jealous because the protagonist was getting a lot of attention from the girls, and he even indirectly let her know. Naoto told her he was somewhat nervous because the paintings were highly praised. Although he admits he expected it a bit because he liked painting them, he wasn't used to compliments yet. He thanked Nagatoro for accepting to be his model because she inspired him, saying that without her, his paintings wouldn't have had the same impact. She was surprised by his words but didn't say anything else and went with the protagonist to eat. They spent time having lunch at the festival and returned to the art club. They found there were problems, so they decided to get up to speed, discovering that the president had gotten into trouble with the school board because she was showing paintings that were too erotic without permission. The president was taken to the correctional facility, and Nagatoro and the protagonist decided to follow her and listen to the conversation. Naoto didn't agree that the board wanted to take away the president's freedom of expression. He decided to intervene and forcibly entered the correctional facility, defending and asking why they wanted to prohibit the president's art exhibition. Some students in charge of the correctional facility mentioned there were many rumors about the president, including that she incites lust among the students. Naoto disagreed with this, saying there were also people who appreciated the president's art as something serious. He mentioned that if it hadn't been for the president's art, he would never have discovered that he enjoys drawing Nagatoro. The rest of the girls joined to support this, showing in a video that although there were students who looked lustfully at the president's painting, there were others who looked at it seriously. This surprised the correctional facility a bit, but they decided to discuss the issue with the president alone. Naoto and the others had no choice but to leave and return to the exhibition. They were somewhat disappointed that the correctional facility was too stubborn with its decisions. However, the president soon appeared, and everyone was nervous about what could happen. The president approached Naoto and told him that she had reached an agreement with the correctional facility. She could show her art as long as she conducted a survey and presented a report on it. She thanked the group for making the correctional facility reflect. Nagatoro took the opportunity to remind the president that she lost the duel she had with the protagonist. The president mentioned she would withdraw Naoto's expulsion. The protagonist thanked the president for keeping her word. The girls took the opportunity to punish the president, although this worried Naoto a bit. After the exhibition, Hakioji picked up several chairs and stored them. He was surprised to see the president enter dressed as a rabbit. He asked her why she was wearing that outfit, and she replied that it was her punishment for losing. She explained that she was forced to sell the products created by Nagatoro and her friends. Naoto was somewhat embarrassed by the girl's punishment, but the president clarified that she wasn't upset about it. On the contrary, it was giving her inspiration to paint a painting about it. Meanwhile, we see Gamo and Yoshi counting all the money they raised with the sales. Nagatoro decided to go look for Hakioji, realizing that the president was flirting with the protagonist. She didn't hesitate to intervene, and the president explained that it was all a joke. She admired the paintings painted by Naoto, saying that finally his painting conveys emotions, and she commented that she could perceive too much love in the paintings. Nagatoro was surprised to hear this and asked Hakioji if it was true. He refused to confess because he didn't want to be rejected. Their conversation was interrupted by the school administrator, who announced through a megaphone about a concert that would take place in the auditorium, all organized by the music club. Naoto decided to invite Nagatoro to see the concert, and she decided to accept, taking the protagonist's hand excitedly to go to the concert. Later on, we see a guy scolding another girl for writing a document wrong. Not only that, she had also used the wrong format and was asked to redo it. Here we meet Ai Mashiro, who was a first-year high school student. She had become the council secretary by inertia. The council president cornered Ai to ask her to respond to each of his orders to see if she understood. He hated that she was so shy. The next day, Ai didn't hesitate to run to school, complaining that she overslept because her alarm didn't go off. As she ran through the hallways, she discovered that the council president was taking an exam, but noticed that he was cheating. The boy realized this and didn't hesitate to confront Ai in the student council room. He promised not to cheat on exams again and asked her not to tell anyone. Ai decided to keep the secret, but in return, he must do everything she says or she will expose him. All this was about a new manga that Naoto was reading. He identified with the male Hakioji character, who had to do everything the girl asked. His reading would be interrupted by Nagatoro's appearance, who greeted the protagonist and showed him that she bought new shoes. Naoto tried to discreetly hide his manga, but Nagatoro discovered it and took the manga from him. She started reading it, saying she was surprised that a guy was reading shoujo manga. The protagonist clarified that he only bought it because it will be turned into an anime. Nagatoro reassured him, saying that there was nothing wrong with the manga because she reads the same manga as him. She decided to show Hakioji how the story progresses in the manga and asked if he wanted to try the same things. The protagonist refused and accidentally stained Nagatoro's new shoes. He apologized to her and cleaned them, Several months later, we see Naoto walking to school again, and he met Nagatoro. Hakioji remembered all the things he had done with Nagatoro, and wondered if he would ever have the courage to start interacting with her. He wanted to approach her to talk, but he lost his courage and withdrew. He didn't want people to think badly of them as they walked to school. Unbeknownst to him, Nagatoro was watching him. Naoto became nervous, and she asked him if he was trying to harass her, teasing him heavily. The protagonist explained that he just wanted to approach her to greet her but didn't have the courage to do it. Nagatoro was surprised to hear this and promised to teach him how to greet people, clarifying that both he and she are very close. The next day, Naoto was on his way to school again, and Nagatoro appeared unexpectedly to give him a head pat as a greeting. She recommended that if he wanted to learn how to greet people, then he should make physical contact in some way, as that is a way to show affection. She demonstrated various ways to greet and asked him to try one. Naoto refused to do it and continued walking. He wondered if he should greet Nagatoro with gentle head pats, imagining what her expression would be like, or if she would be surprised if he greeted her with a hug. Naoto was very distracted with his thoughts and accidentally stumbled. To avoid falling, he was forced to hug Nagatoro, immediately apologizing to her. As revenge, Nagatoro gave him a pat that knocked him to the ground. Gamo and Yoshi happened to pass by the same street and joined the pair. Gamo reminded Nagatoro that they must meet to attend the party that will take place. Nagatoro explained to Hakioji that the school would have a post-festival party. Later, in the art room, Naoto was drawing a vase. He wondered if he should join the post-festival party. Nagatoro complained to the protagonist that it was too cold. Naoto told her that the air conditioning in the room wasn't working well, and now it was colder than usual. Nagatoro decided to take out some long socks from her backpack. Naoto asked her why she was carrying socks, and she explained that a girl always wears long socks when she has to wear a skirt, usually to keep warm and protect her legs. Naoto thought about Nagatoro's legs and murmured that there was nothing to do. She heard this and teased the protagonist because she knew he liked her legs and asked him to be the one to put on her socks. Naoto mentally prepared himself not to die of embarrassment and helped Nagatoro put on the socks. When they finished, she asked him if the socks matched her look. Naoto stared at her nervously and said they weren't bad. Nagatoro received a message from Gamo and Yoshi, so she went to the party, inviting the protagonist. Both went to a restaurant to meet them. Naoto mentioned that he didn't have money to contribute his part, but Nagatoro reassured him by telling him that they are using the money they earned from the festival sales. The four of them ate in the dining room and enjoyed the taste. They shared the dishes among themselves, and Nagatoro offered hers to Hakioji. Gamo took the opportunity to demonstrate her cooking skills and prepared a familiar salmon for Naoto. Each of them shared their salmon with Hakioji, and he praised the taste of each one. He noticed that Nagatoro looked much happier than usual. Several days later, Naoto was in the art room trying to think about what he could paint since he hasn't had motivation to draw lately. The school president appeared, and the protagonist got scared. The president approached to see the protagonist's drawing, saying that he had been losing a lot of practice. Naoto apologized, but she told him not to worry. After all, he had put a lot of effort into an event like the festival, where he exhibited his art. She clarified that it's normal for him to feel exhausted and unable to draw. She decided to give the protagonist a ticket to the zoo and asked him to make a portrait of the zoo animals. Naoto decided to take this as advice since he had never drawn any animals and thought it might help him get motivated. Hakioji noticed that there were 2 zoo tickets, and the president recommended that he invite Nagatoro. Later, Nagatoro entered the art room and sat on the couch to read a manga. Naoto decided to gather courage and asked Nagatoro if she liked animals. She affirmed nervously, approached Hakioji, and asked what was up with the animals. Naoto decided to put aside the zoo tickets and asked her if she had ever drawn before. Nagatoro thought for a moment, then mentioned that she had drawn on occasion. Hakioji took this opportunity to invite Nagatoro to the zoo, showing her the tickets the president gave him. Nagatoro started teasing Hakioji and decided to accept going to the zoo with him. On the agreed day, they both went to the zoo and met at the entrance. Nagatoro was excited about it, telling Hakioji that she hadn't visited the zoo since elementary school. They decided to explore the place and see some animals. Nagatoro looked at the red pandas and was surprised to see one of them standing up. She soon realized that Naoto was very focused on his drawings, and she felt a little disappointed. Naoto noticed that Nagatoro was somewhat sad, so he offered to take a walk with her. She refused, saying that she would help him with the drawings, but in return, he must teach her how to draw. Naoto agreed, and she helped him with some sketches, reminding the protagonist constantly of the deal they made. Hakioji decided to take Nagatoro's hand and teach her how to draw. Naoto tried to control his nerves, as his voice even started trembling, and Nagatoro teased him about it. They decided to visit each animal in the zoo to make a portrait of each one. After finishing the portraits, they decided to rest in the zoo's dining area. They both looked at their drawings, and Nagatoro realized that she drew poorly. Naoto told her that wasn't true, clarifying that compared to last time, she draws better now. Nagatoro asked Naoto to continue teaching her to draw. Nagatoro decided to go to the bathroom, and Naoto stayed to keep the drawings. A guy appeared with a girl and approached Hakioji, asking if he goes to the same high school as Nagatoro. Naoto was a little surprised and told him yes. The guy told him that they had seen each other at the park. Hakioji realized that they were the same guys who bothered Nagatoro and her friends. The couple took the protagonist's drawings and decided to review them. When they saw Nagatoro's drawings, they didn't hesitate to mock her style. Naoto got upset about this and stood up from his seat, saying that Nagatoro put a lot of effort into drawing them. The couple got upset with the protagonist's attitude and decided to humiliate him. However, Nagatoro appeared at that moment and intervened to defend Naoto. Nagatoro's mere presence was enough for the couple to be afraid of what might happen. They both didn't hesitate to praise Nagatoro's drawing skills, even though they had mocked her before. Nagatoro asked them if they had any problem with Naoto. The couple, somewhat nervous, said they didn't have any problems with him and were just praising him for his drawings. Nagatoro knew they were lying and looked at them angrily. The couple decided to return the drawings and left. Naoto thanked her for saving him from that situation, as he was afraid the guy would start a fight. Nagatoro told him it was nothing and asked him to be braver next time, as more people will try to take advantage of his cowardice. They both decided to leave the dining area and went to look at the zoo map. Naoto had an idea, so he asked Nagatoro about her favorite animal. She tells him that her favorite animal is the sloth. Naoto decided to make a portrait of the sloth, trying his best. Soon he started wondering why Nagatoro was drawing farther than usual. After they finished the portraits, Naoto gave the sloth drawing to Nagatoro. She gave the protagonist a drawing of himself. He noticed that she put effort into making the portrait. He knew it from the strokes. At that moment, he started wondering if Nagatoro feels something for him, but immediately denied this idea and went home, realizing that he had forgotten again that his reason for drawing is the love he feels for Nagatoro. Several days later, in the art room, Naoto made a portrait of a plant. Nagatoro, on the other hand, had recently woken up after taking a nap on the classroom sofa. Sakura called Nagatoro to remind her that they have a girls' outing. She told the protagonist that she would be alone today. Naoto realized that Nagatoro forgot her phone and thought she would come back if she noticed. The protagonist's curiosity and insecurity forced him to take the phone and look for Nagatoro. A girl approached Naoto when she saw him looking lost around the school and asked if he needed anything. Our protagonist told her he was looking for Nagatoro. She didn't seem to recognize the last name and asked for the first name. Naoto was blanked by the question since he never knew Nagatoro's name. Naoto remembered her nickname and called her Hayaki. The girl told him that Nagatoro was in Class C, and the protagonist entered the classroom. He realized she wasn't there and wondered where she could be. He then saw Gamo and Yoshi leaving. He thought about giving them the phone, but he was afraid they would misinterpret everything and start making heavy jokes. Naoto decided to leave, but he ran into Sakura on the way and quickly hid. Soon, he realized he had hidden in their classroom and was afraid of being discovered. He stayed silent, locked inside a locker to avoid being discovered. However, he heard the whole conversation of the girls. They talked about relationships, and Naoto thought of a way to get out of the classroom. One of his friends asked Nagatoro if she was in love with someone. She said she would only be with someone who can entertain her. Naoto, upon hearing this, thought about all the things he went through with her, realizing that Nagatoro has more fun with him. She noticed she didn't have her phone and decided to look for it. Out of nervousness, Naoto accidentally hit the locker, alarming the girls. Nagatoro approached the locker and checked it, finding Naoto inside. Nagatoro got upset, but she decided to cover it up and asked him what he was doing. Naoto said nothing and handed the phone to Nagatoro. She noticed that the protagonist ended up in this situation because he wanted to return her phone. Sakura asked Nagatoro if there was something wrong. She denied it and created a quick distraction to get the protagonist out of the classroom. She took the opportunity to scold Hakioji for hiding in a locker and not having the courage to face it. Besides, she asked if he heard the conversation. Naoto denied it and simply left. At night, we see Naoto jogging around his neighborhood. He was practicing a little since his physical education exam would be a marathon. While jogging, he stepped on a crack and accidentally hurt his ankle. The next day, all the students in the school participated in the marathon. Naoto started jogging with the girls. However, he ended up separating from the group. Nagatoro accompanied Naoto in the marathon. Hakioji kept jogging until his ankle couldn't take it anymore and worsened. Nagatoro noticed this, so she decided to carry the protagonist and took him back to school to see the doctor. Naoto was a bit confused about Nagatoro. He didn't know if she was in love with him or not, as there were times when she exaggerated with her jokes and teased him a lot, but at other times, she acted like a girl in love. He didn't think more about the situation and focused on his ankle. Nagatoro decided to carry the protagonist on her back and quickly took him to the infirmary. Naoto realized that Nagatoro was suffering, so he asked her to put him down, as he didn't want her to get hurt because of him. Gamo and the others appeared. They were surprised by Naoto's words, so they congratulated him for being honest with Nagatoro and helped him get to the infirmary. Several weeks later, Naoto was in the art room making a portrait. He wondered what Nagatoro was doing, as she hadn't visited him in 2 days, and he hadn't received a message either. He thought Nagatoro might be upset for having heard the conversation and decided to talk to her. However, she didn't answer. Naoto, somewhat worried, went to Gamo and Yoshi to greet them. They suspected something and asked the protagonist if something was wrong. Naoto asked them if they knew anything about Nagatoro. Gamo told him she was sick and that's why she hadn't been to class. She asked if he knows where she lives, which the protagonist confirms, and Gamo asked him to deliver Nagatoro the exams she missed. Naoto went to Nagatoro's house and rang the doorbell several times. A mysterious girl was in the house and asked the protagonist who he was. He said he wanted to deliver some exams to Nagatoro. Here, Naoto would realize that the girl was Nagatoro's older sister. She let the protagonist enter the house to see Nagatoro, offered him tea, and sat with him in the dining room. She mentioned that Nagatoro was sleeping and asked him to wait quietly. Naoto thanked her for the hospitality, and the girl told him that Nagatoro talks a lot about him. Naoto was a bit surprised by this and didn't say anything more. The girl asked Hakioji if he was interested in Nagatoro, which he nervously denied. The sister teased him, saying she thought of telling him many things about Nagatoro. Naoto began to doubt. Here he realized he was interested, as he didn't usually worry about people until he met Nagatoro. Naoto reflected for a moment and decided to be honest, confessing that he is interested. At that moment, Nagatoro appeared. She had just woken up and was surprised to see the protagonist. She shouted in embarrassment, asking why he visited without warning. Naoto told her he left a message, but she never replied. Nagatoro scolded him, saying she was asleep, and the protagonist apologized. The sister advised Nagatoro not to be so harsh with the protagonist, as it's the first time a guy visits her at home. The sister decided to tease Nagatoro a bit and showed her the gifts Naoto brought. Nagatoro remained proud, so the sister prepared Nagatoro's favorite pudding. Nagatoro couldn't resist the temptation and decided to listen to her sister. Naoto was surprised to see Nagatoro so controlled. The sister took advantage of this to make pudding for the protagonist too, and asked them to chat together. Nagatoro refused and invited Hakioji to her room, saying they would eat pudding there. The sister teased Nagatoro, saying she's too cold. Naoto went to the room and started eating. He apologized to Nagatoro for visiting her like that. She told him not to worry, she was just surprised by the surprise, and thanked him for daring to visit her. Nagatoro decided to feed the protagonist while they were alone. The sister entered the room unexpectedly to leave drinks and interrupt Nagatoro's moment. Nagatoro realized her sister's malice and asked her to leave. The sister agreed. However, she warned that she still wants to talk to Naoto. When they were alone, Nagatoro asked the protagonist about the conversation he had with her sister. Naoto refused to answer and just kept eating. After finishing, he thought about leaving immediately, but Nagatoro stopped him and asked him to play video games. He agreed and decided to play. In the middle of the games, Nagatoro asked the protagonist about what he wanted to know, but he refused to answer. This annoyed Nagatoro, asking if he exchanged information with her sister to know a secret. Naoto denied this, confessing that he would never pry into someone's life behind their back. Nagatoro decided to let it go and continued playing. She came up with an idea and told Hakioji that if she wins a game, she will tell him a secret. Naoto decided to do his best. In the middle of the game, Nagatoro asked what he wanted to know, and Naoto said he just wanted to know her full name. This took Nagatoro by surprise. She asked if he had never told her what his name was. Naoto said he never did, and she was amazed. She let him win on purpose, was about to reveal her name, but Naoto refused. He explained that he didn't want to know her name because of a bet, and confessed that he prefers to find out by himself, clarifying that he will bring up the topic of her name someday. Nagatoro blushed at this and started teasing the protagonist to hide her embarrassment. The sister intervened in the situation to show Naoto the family album, specifically the photos Nagatoro had. Later, Naoto left the house and said goodbye to Nagatoro. She thanked him for visiting. Naoto decided to go home, thanks to the sister. He found out Nagatoro's full name, which made him happy, as he also witnessed how Nagatoro enjoyed spending time with her sister. The next day, Nagatoro went with the protagonist to school. She greeted him with a gentle tap on the head. They left together and chatted along the way. Naoto was a bit nervous now that he knew Nagatoro's name. She showed the protagonist that she had been checking the internet to find out what gestures boys like. Naoto advised her not to believe everything written on the internet. He moved his hand away from Nagatoro. This annoyed her, and she tried to force the protagonist to hold hands. Naoto started dodging Nagatoro, matching her agility. By accident, they both held hands. Gamo, Sakura, and Yoshi saw this. Nagatoro quickly tried to cover it up, but it was too late, as her friends had already seen everything. The next day, Naoto would end up sick and informed his mother about it. She lamented, saying she couldn't take care of him because she had a business trip to attend. The woman thought about canceling her trip, but Hakioji asked her not to worry, saying he could take care of himself and it wasn't serious. The woman left, and the protagonist skipped school. Nagatoro wondered where Naoto was, so she went to look for him in the art room. Seeing he wasn't there, she decided to send him several messages to find out where he was and why he hadn't gone to school. Naoto was a bit worried about this, thinking that Nagatoro must be frustrated not to have someone to spend the day with at school. He decided to tell her about his cold and received a call from Nagatoro instantly. He answered the call, and Nagatoro was very concerned, asking if he was okay and similar things. Naoto asked her not to worry so much. Nagatoro mentioned feeling guilty because she believed she had infected him. Naoto tried to calm her down, saying it's not her fault. Nagatoro found out that Hakioji was alone at home, so she decided to visit him after school. Nagatoro asked Naoto to lie down, helped him walk to the room, left him in bed, and took care of him, noticing that he was suffering a bit. Nagatoro decided to check Naoto's temperature. He was starting to feel dizzy due to the intense fever and almost fainted. Nagatoro quickly fetched a bucket and a cloth. She soaked the cloth in cold water and placed it on the protagonist's forehead to cool him down. She took care of Naoto all day. Due to the situation, Naoto ended up imagining a future with Nagatoro, one where she was his wife and took care of him when he was sick. Nagatoro stayed by the protagonist's side, making sure he was okay. Soon, Hakioji's mother arrived, and Nagatoro was alarmed. The next day, Naoto went down to the kitchen feeling a little better. His mother took the opportunity to ask Naoto who Nagatoro was. Our protagonist didn't know what to answer, and his mother asked if she was his girlfriend. Naoto immediately denied it with some embarrassment. The protagonist decided to go to school, and on the way, he met Nagatoro, who was relieved to see that Naoto was better, and she accompanied him. Several months later, we see Nagatoro asking her sister what could be the best Christmas present. She asked if she would give the gift to someone special, which Nagatoro denied. Her sister would give her advice on what she could give. We changed scenes to Naoto and Nagatoro looking at a Christmas tree. The protagonist decided to gather courage and gave Nagatoro a gift. She would also give him a Christmas present. All this was a dream of Hakioji's, which was interrupted by the alarm. Naoto woke up and looked at the gift he had prepared for Nagatoro. He decided to go to school and met Nagatoro. They both talked about what they could do. Naoto noticed that she was very excited about Christmas. The protagonist thought about giving the gift to Nagatoro at that moment and analyzed the situation. However, he didn't have the courage to do it. Gamo and the others interrupted the conversation to invite both of them to a gathering. All of Nagatoro's friends were discussing what they could do that day. Gamo and Yoshi were upset because they were the only ones without a partner. Naoto was thinking about how to give the gift to Nagatoro while looking at his backpack. He noticed that she also had a gift. Naoto became very nervous about the situation and noticed that Nagatoro was insecure. He decided to ignore everything to avoid overthinking. Nagatoro, on the other hand, realized that the protagonist had a gift. They both decided to make an excuse to leave that place and go to the art room. They pretended to be looking for something, and Naoto tried to think of a way to give her the gift. He decided to approach her discreetly to give her the gift, but the president intervened since she was using the art room, and they didn't want the protagonist to have a date inside the room. Naoto and Nagatoro had no choice but to try to find a moment to exchange gifts, which was very difficult since they were always interrupted. They both went to the rooftop of the school, and Naoto took the opportunity to give his gift to Nagatoro. When she opened it, she was surprised. It was a scarf. Nagatoro thanked him with a smile and gave her gift to the protagonist. He was surprised that it was also a scarf. He didn't expect his gift to match hers, and they went home together. Several days later, New Year's Eve was approaching, and the protagonist received a call from Nagatoro. They chatted for a while, and Nagatoro mentioned that she would like to spend New Year's Eve at the city temple. Naoto, upon hearing this, wanted to invite her, but she suddenly hung up. Hakioji decided to go to the temple to find her, but he couldn't. Soon, Naoto would be surprised by Nagatoro's appearance, who reveals to Hakioji that she will work as a volunteer at the city temple just for New Year's Eve. Nagatoro took advantage of being a volunteer to give the protagonist a tour of the temple, explaining how he should behave and what things he can do within the area. This was part of the city's tradition, and she wanted to experience it with Naoto. One of the things Naoto would do was to test his luck for the next year. He would realize that he would have bad luck in love, which demotivated him a bit, and he decided to say goodbye to Nagatoro, leaving the temple. He decided to read his fortune completely and realized that the lucky paper recommended him to be direct with his feelings and not wait any longer. Naoto decided to gather his courage and went to look for Nagatoro. Once he found her, he mentioned that he would be waiting outside when she finished working. Later, we see Hakioji waiting and meeting Nagatoro. He invited her to make a wish together, and she accepted. They had to wait in a long line to do so since there were too many couples wanting to make wishes. Naoto realized that the place where wishes are made focuses on marriage, which made Hakioji very nervous, and Nagatoro took the opportunity to tease him. After they could enter the sanctuary, they made their wish. Naoto couldn't help but look at Nagatoro. They both went to a pier. She asked Hakioji about his wish in the end, and he refused to answer. Then he would ask her what her wish was. Nagatoro blushed a bit and gathered her courage to tell him that she wished to become his wife. This took Naoto by surprise since he didn't expect those words. Nagatoro quickly pretended it was all a joke since she couldn't contain her embarrassment and forcibly teased the protagonist. A few weeks later, we see Hakioji in the art room trying to draw something. Nagatoro entered to greet him and noticed that Naoto had a box of contact lenses. She asked if he was trying to change his appearance to become handsome and leave the glasses behind. Naoto denied this, saying he wants to use contact lenses because he finds glasses annoying. Nagatoro decided to encourage Hakioji to try the contact lenses. Naoto didn't have the courage to do it, so Nagatoro offered to put the contact lenses on him. The protagonist refused because he was afraid she would hurt his eyes as a joke. She asked him to relax since she had done it before with her sister. Naoto sat on the couch and took off his glasses. Nagatoro approached to put the contact lenses on the protagonist. At first, she had difficulty due to Naoto's nerves, but she succeeded. Hakioji looked around, realizing he could see with his contact lenses. Nagatoro borrowed the glasses from the protagonist, and he handed them over. She put on the glasses and imitated the protagonist's habits. Naoto found Nagatoro attractive with glasses but didn't want to say it. Some days later, we see Nagatoro and her friends practicing skiing. Naoto, on the other hand, was with Nagatoro's friends' boyfriends, and they simply watched everything. Nagatoro approached Naoto and greeted him. She invited him to go skiing with her, which the protagonist accepted. The guys encouraged Naoto to be braver with Nagatoro. He decided to listen to them and went up to the top of the mountain with her. They slid down, and Naoto ended up crashing into a snow wall. Nagatoro got worried and went to check on him. However, seeing that he was okay, she decided to tease him and asked if he knows how to ski, which Naoto affirmed. She decided to teach the protagonist how to ski. They had fun doing it the whole time. At night, the group decided to go skiing, but Naoto didn't join them because he was very tired. Besides, he felt frustrated because he couldn't have fun with Nagatoro. Gamo and Yoshi approached the protagonist to confront him since they wanted him to spend time with Nagatoro and encouraged him to be braver. Naoto decided to go skiing at night and practiced a bit. His frustration became more evident as he got hurt because he wanted to do some physical activity with Nagatoro but got frustrated because his body couldn't keep up. Soon, a guy appeared. He was about to crash violently into a tree, and Naoto managed to save his life. Two more guys appeared, and they were about to crash into the protagonist by accident. Nagatoro appeared just in time to save Naoto, avoiding a fatal accident. She mentioned that she saw the moment when he saved the guy and praised Naoto for it since he could ski well. Naoto took the opportunity to spend time with Nagatoro and asked her to teach him how to ski. She agreed, and they slid down together all night. The next day, the protagonist went to school, and the president met with Naoto to tell him that she would go to university, so she left her things to him and some responsibilities. Naoto would realize that he has changed a lot and no longer gets nervous talking to people. It had barely been 1.5 since he met Nagatoro, and he feels sad because he doesn't know much about her. That same day, the protagonist would store several of his paintings and, with Nagatoro's help, would sell some old paintings from students who are no longer around. Hakioji took the opportunity to paint a bit, but he didn't feel like it and wondered what he could do to get motivated. He decided to ask Nagatoro if she wanted to be his model again, and she agreed. He asked her if there was a specific pose she needed to do, and he said no, clarifying that he just wanted a pose as natural as possible for her. Nagatoro thought and decided to pose, adopting a combat posture. Naoto was surprised by the naturalness that Nagatoro emanated with that posture, and wondered what kind of martial art she must have practiced. He decided to make her portrait. After finishing, Nagatoro looked at the results and teased the protagonist a bit. He took the opportunity to ask Nagatoro about the martial art from which that pose comes. She tells him that she has her own martial art that she developed. The next day, Naoto decided to go to the judo club to practice a bit, but he found it hard to keep up with physical combat. In the afternoon, he decided to continue drawing and realized that Nagatoro wasn't there. Gamo and Yoshi appeared in the art room to look for her, but they were disappointed to see that the protagonist was alone. They commented that they were looking for Nagatoro to enroll her in the school judo tournament. Naoto asked if Nagatoro had practiced judo. Gamo decided to invite the protagonist to go to a gym with her and train a bit. Naoto realized that Nagatoro was in one of the gym photos. The next day, the protagonist decided to go to the gym, finding Nagatoro sparring with Gamo. She was surprised and decided to stop to confront the protagonist since he was getting into something risky with his physical condition. Naoto explained that he just wants to practice a bit to improve in the school judo tournament, and asked her to teach him. Nagatoro decided to leave without saying anything. Naoto expected that reaction, but he was surprised when Nagatoro threw a uniform at him. The protagonist changed and decided to go straight to practice with Nagatoro. Naoto struggled a lot to beat Nagatoro in strength, as she had a lock that gave her a lot of advantage. Naoto, in desperation, asked her to let him breathe since she weighed too much. This angered Nagatoro, as she thought he called her fat, and she tortured him with that lock. Hakioji decided to take a break and watched Nagatoro train for several days. After training, Naoto asked Nagatoro if she had done judo professionally before. She affirmed it, mentioning that she decided to leave judo when she encountered a rival she could never beat, which frustrated her so much that she decided to quit the sport. Naoto thought there must be more to it, but he didn't want to insist. He proposed to Nagatoro to join the school judo tournament, but she refused, saying she was already retired, and she went home. Naoto knew she was discouraged by the situation and, before she left, he praised her technique, commenting that her judo locks are visually beautiful. This took her by surprise, and she left without saying anything. At night, the protagonist continued practicing. He wanted to do his best in the tournament for Nagatoro. Nagatoro, on the other hand, wanted to join the tournament, but after remembering her defeat, she decided not to. The next day, at school, the tournament took place. Nagatoro decided to join at the last moment and won her first match. Gamo's turn came, and she faced Orihara, who easily defeated Gamo despite the difference in strength. Nagatoro asked if she had ever fought her, which Gamo confirmed. Nagatoro would face Orihara in the second round. She approached Nagatoro to greet her. Everyone was surprised that Nagatoro and Orihara knew each other. Nagatoro remembered their fight and decided to withdraw. She thought about leaving the tournament, but Naoto appeared to try to cheer her up. He suspected a bit about what could be the past between Orihara and Nagatoro, so he tried to find out something. But he didn't get any information. Seeing Hakioji's insistence and concern, Nagatoro decided to tell him. She mentioned that she did judo as a child and was considered a prodigy in judo, even winning several tournaments. She trained at the same dojo as Orihara. She clarified that Orihara had no talent for judo. In all the confrontations they had, Orihara always lost, which bothered her. That motivated Orihara to become better and train tirelessly, until one day, she couldn't win against her. That day devastated her because in her confrontation against Orihara, she lost by a wide margin since she couldn't do anything against Orihara. That made her realize that she would never be able to beat her, that Orihara's effort would beat her talent. Just with the idea of always losing against her, they forced her to quit judo, as she would never have fun that way. She mentions that currently, Orihara is a candidate to represent the national team in the judo tournament. Nagatoro thought about going to the referee to surrender, but Naoto confronted her, saying that giving up is not like her. This upset Nagatoro, and she looked at him angrily, saying that he doesn't know her well enough to comment. These words hurt Naoto, but he decided to confront Nagatoro, saying that she can't give up because she's not even trying to do anything. Nagatoro reminded him that Orihara is from the national team, and Naoto mentioned that he trusts her, knows she's a prodigy, and she'll be able to beat her if she tries. Nagatoro cheered up a bit and decided to try hard in the fight just for the protagonist. She clarified that she'll only beat Orihara if he wins a match. Naoto was surprised by this. He didn't really believe he would advance to the next round, but he decided to do it so that Nagatoro could regain her motivation in judo. The protagonist's turn came. He faced a much stronger and physically prepared opponent. Naoto was afraid because of the physical difference. The referee started the match. Naoto was so scared that he didn't realize he was being grabbed. He quickly reacted and struggled with the guy. The guy used the struggle to his advantage to violently knock the protagonist to the ground. The referee decided to caution the guy, saying that he used too much force against Naoto. The latter prepared for the fight again and was thrown. He couldn't do anything because of his fear. The guy took advantage of this to put all his weight on Naoto. The latter tried to free himself, but he couldn't do anything against the strength. He remembered the conversation with Nagatoro and lost the fear. He wanted Nagatoro to regain her motivation in judo at all costs. Motivated and fearless, Naoto managed to make the guy retreat by countering his lock with another, earning a point. Naoto quickly applied a lock to the guy to keep him on the ground. It was hard for him because of the enormous strength difference. The protagonist's fear began to overcome him because he knew he was going to lose. Nagatoro decided to cheer on the protagonist. This worked, and Naoto managed to tie the match. However, the referee decided to give the victory to the guy. Naoto was discouraged because he wanted to win at all costs. However, the guy praised Hakioji, saying he has good judo technique. After seeing this, Nagatoro decided to take the tournament seriously and win for the protagonist. Nagatoro prepared to fight Orihara, and they greeted each other. The match began, and both remained equal, with the same agility, strength, and speed. Both used all their experience not to give in to the other. This exchange between hard training and talent made the fight more exciting, catching Gamo's attention, as she had never seen Nagatoro take a fight seriously. Both exchanged locks and analyzed each other. Orihara managed to destabilize Nagatoro and threw her to the ground. However, it didn't count as a point since Nagatoro managed to withstand it. She was tired because of Orihara's skill. However, she kept trying. All the students started cheering for Orihara just because of her popularity. This, of course, affected Nagatoro. Naoto realized that she was getting discouraged and distracted. He couldn't take it anymore and shouted with all his might, encouraging Nagatoro. This cheered her up, and she managed to make Orihara retreat, catching her by surprise and throwing her to the ground. Later, after the tournament ended, Nagatoro was somewhat disappointed that the referee didn't give her the point to win. Naoto encouraged Nagatoro, saying she was close to beating Orihara, which means she can improve more. Nagatoro mentioned that she didn't like the outcome and plans to have a rematch. She tells him that if she wins the rematch, he'll reward her with a kiss. Naoto blushed upon hearing this and asked if it was a joke, which Nagatoro denied, saying she really wants a kiss from him. After this, Nagatoro left. A few weeks later, Naoto decided to look for new members for the art club and posted several ads around the school hallways. It was a new year, and the protagonist thought about what he should paint. Nagatoro entered the room to accompany him, and she decided to model. Naoto decided to portray her. Nagatoro decided to change into her swimsuit, and Hakioji was somewhat nervous about it, but he ended up agreeing and painted her. Naoto couldn't stop thinking about Nagatoro's words. He wondered if the kiss thing was really a joke or something serious. He finished the portrait, and Nagatoro took a break. She let the protagonist know that she had back pain and asked him to give her a massage. He agreed to do it. He gave Nagatoro several massages, noticing that she was very tense, and asked her if she had been training or something similar. She asked him about the comment, and the protagonist mentioned that she was very tense. After finishing the massage, he returned to finish the painting. Nagatoro decided to reveal to Naoto that she had returned to judo, and would dedicate herself to it. She wanted to beat Orihara at all costs. Naoto took the opportunity to ask her if her efforts were for the kiss. She confirmed this, clarifying that her comment was no joke. Naoto asked her if she was sure. This annoyed Nagatoro, and she asked him if he didn't want to kiss her. Hakioji thought for a moment about the situation and didn't know what to say. A girl entered the room to interrupt them. Naoto recognized her, which made Nagatoro jealous. She decided to interrogate the girl. This new girl was Kazuhaya. Naoto asked her why she came to the art club, and Kazuhaya explained that she did it on her cousin's recommendation. The protagonist decided to tell Nagatoro that Kazuhaya was a former classmate from another art club he was in. Naoto decided to introduce them. Kazuhaya asked both of them if they were dating because she overheard them talking about a kiss. Immediately, they both denied it. Kazuhaya asked if there were more students besides her, and Naoto said no. Nagatoro realized Kazuhaya's intentions and threatened her, asking her to be careful with the protagonist. After this, Nagatoro left. Hakioji took the opportunity to give Kazuhaya some lessons. The latter helped the protagonist finish a painting of Nagatoro. Both Nagatoro and the protagonist received advice from their friends on how they could carry out the relationship while dedicating themselves to different things. At night, the protagonist met with the president and chatted with her a bit. The president had noticed that Naoto was doubting his feelings towards Nagatoro and recommended that he follow his heart. Naoto decided to go look for Nagatoro and waited for her to finish training. They met and went home together. Nagatoro asked the protagonist if he missed her in the club, and Naoto confirmed this. He thought about the president's words and invited Nagatoro on a date. She thought of a place that they would both like, and Naoto also thought about a place. The protagonist couldn't think of an idea until he remembered the zoo. Hakioji asked her if she wanted to go to the aquarium with him. Nagatoro quickly approached Naoto and asked him to repeat the proposal. Hakioji remembered the president's words. Naoto gathered his courage and asked Nagatoro to have a date at the aquarium on a day when they didn't have classes. Hakioji expected some joke or teasing from her, but Nagatoro gladly accepted the date. The next day, Naoto painted a bit with Kazuhaya in the art room. He decided to tell her about his date with Nagatoro. Kazuhaya was happy to hear this and congratulated the protagonist for daring to take the first step. At night, the protagonist was thinking about what clothes to wear on the day of the aquarium. Naoto waited for Nagatoro, feeling somewhat worried. He didn't know if he was dressed properly or not. He was surprised to see Nagatoro dressed up, and they went to the aquarium. This entire date would be watched by Kazuhaya, the president, Gamo, and Yoshi. They wanted to supervise that the date went well and were willing to do whatever it took to make it so. Naoto and Nagatoro went to the aquarium by taking the city metro. Neither of them knew they were being spied on. At the aquarium, they toured the entire place, enjoying seeing the animals. Nagatoro decided to take a selfie with Hakioji right by the penguin pond. Naoto noticed that Nagatoro was somewhat upset. Hakioji realized they were being spied on. Naoto took Nagatoro's hand and started to run with her. He didn't want the date to be ruined. Yoshi and Gamo followed them. Kazuhaya and the president appeared to protect the protagonist and Nagatoro. A confrontation between Gamo, Yoshi, Kazuhaya, and the president began. The protagonist, on the other hand, took Nagatoro to eat ice cream. After eating, they went to see the dolphins and their performance. Naoto was paying attention to make sure no one intervened in the date. Suddenly, one of the dolphins tried to splash Nagatoro. Naoto reacted and protected Nagatoro without hesitation. She was surprised by the protagonist's quick reaction. Nagatoro took out a towel and dried the protagonist. They continued to watch the aquarium animals, bought some souvenirs, and walked along the beach. Naoto decided to resolve his doubt and stopped. He asked Nagatoro if the date was real or not. She looked at him and mentioned that the date was real, and she enjoyed it. Hakioji decided to confess that he also enjoyed the date. Naoto tried to hug Nagatoro, but they were interrupted by the girls' fight. The next day, everyone gathered in the art room to discuss the matter and decided to explain the situation. Everyone came to an apology. After classes, Nagatoro and the protagonist looked at each other. They hugged each other to finish what was interrupted on the date. This made both of them happy, and they promised each other that from now on, they would prepare school lunch together and share it. If you've reached this part of the video, comment the word sadistic in the comments. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss the next part of this anime.